September 17, 1945. Fort Eustis, Virginia. The transport truck lurches to a stop, and Marguerite Fisher grips the wooden bench beneath her, knuckles white against the grain. Through the canvas flap she catches her first glimpse of America, a sprawling compound of whitewashed barracks, impossibly green grass, and guards who stand relaxed, almost bored. The air smells different here. Clean. Heavy with late summer humidity and something else she cannot quite place. Something sweet, like distant flowers or perhaps just the absence of smoke and rubble. She is 31 years old, a cartographer who once traced borders and supply routes for the Wehrmacht, and she expects punishment. She expects cold concrete, thin gruel, perhaps cruelty. What she does not expect is the guard who helps her down from the truck, his hands steady and impersonal but not rough. What she does not expect is the way he says in careful textbook German that dinner will be served in 1 hour. Dinner. Not rations. Not a distribution. Dinner. The word feels foreign in her mouth, like a language she once spoke fluently but has somehow forgotten. For 4 years, Marguerite has eaten to survive. Ersatz coffee made from acorns, bread stretched with sawdust, turnips boiled until they dissolved into gray mush, potatoes with eyes and rot spots carefully carved away. She has learned to chew slowly, to trick her stomach into feeling full. She has learned not to think about taste, about pleasure, about the meals her grandmother used to prepare in their kitchen in Heidelberg, where copper pots hung from hooks and the air always smelled of vanilla and butter and cinnamon. Those memories are dangerous. They make the present unbearable, so she has locked them away, deep in some corner of her mind where they cannot hurt her. But now, standing in this American camp with its neat pathways and its impossible abundance, she feels those memories stirring, pressing against the walls she has built. The processing takes 2 hours. They photograph her, record her information, assign her a barracks number. The female officer who conducts her intake is brisk but not unkind. She speaks no German, so they communicate through gestures and a translator, a German-American private who looks barely old enough to shave. He explains the rules. Roll call twice daily, work assignments based on skills, male privileges after the first month. He does not mention beatings. He does not mention starvation. He does not mention any of the things Marguerite has been preparing herself for. When he finishes, he says something that makes no sense. You can request additional blankets if you are cold. The translator repeats it twice, as if he thinks she has not understood. But she has understood. She simply cannot believe it. By the time they lead her to the mess hall, the sun is setting, painting the Virginia sky in shades of orange and pink that seem almost obscene in their beauty. Marguerite has not seen a sunset in months. In Berlin, the smoke and dust turned every evening into a gray haze. Here, the sky is clear and vast and unbearably lovely. She wants to stop and stare, but the other women in her group keep walking and she follows, her worn shoes scuffing against the gravel path. The mess hall is a long, low building with screens on the windows and electric lights that hum softly overhead. The smell hits her first, bread, actual bread, baking somewhere nearby. Meat roasting, vegetables fresh and green. Her stomach clenches so violently she almost doubles over. She has not smelled food like this since before the war, since before everything fell apart. The line moves slowly. Marguerite watches the women ahead of her, all German, all wearing the same dazed expression she imagines is on her own face. They shuffle forward, holding metal trays, and American soldiers in white aprons heap food onto those trays with casual efficiency. A scoop of mashed potatoes, a ladle of gravy, a piece of chicken, skin still crispy and golden, a roll steaming, green beans glistening with butter. It is too much. It is impossible. Marguerite's hands shake as she accepts her own tray, the weight of it unfamiliar and precious. She follows the others to a long table, sits on a bench worn smooth by countless meals, and stares down at the food in front of her. For a long moment she cannot move, cannot think. The woman next to her, a Berliner with hollow cheeks and gray-streaked hair, picks up her fork and begins to eat with mechanical precision, as if afraid the food will vanish if she hesitates. Others do the same, some quickly, some slowly, some with tears streaming down their faces. Marguerite lifts her fork. The potatoes are smooth and creamy, the gravy rich and savory. The chicken is tender, falling off the bone. She eats slowly, carefully, trying to make it last, trying to memorize every flavor, every texture. It tastes like a dream, like something her mind has invented to torture her. But it is real. She can feel it in her mouth, in her stomach, in the way her body seems to wake up after years of hibernation. She is halfway through her meal when the guard approaches. He is young, maybe 25, with sandy hair and freckles across his nose. He carries a small wooden tray, and on that tray are several glass bottles, each labeled in English. He stops at her table, sets the tray down, and says something in English she does not understand. Then he picks up one of the bottles, a small brown one with a white label, and places it in front of her. He mimes pouring, then points to the bowl of oatmeal at the end of the table, the one meant for breakfast but available now for anyone who wants something plain. Marguerite stares at the bottle, at the words printed on the label, pure vanilla extract. She knows those words. She learned English in school before the war, before everything. Vanilla, her grandmother's kitchen. The small glass bottles lined up on the shelf above the stove. The way her grandmother would let her smell each one, teaching her the difference between vanilla and almond and lemon. The way vanilla smelled like warmth and safety and home. She reaches for the bottle with trembling fingers. The glass is cool and smooth. She unscrews the cap and the scent hits her like a physical blow. Sweet, rich, complex, exactly as she remembers, exactly as it was before the world ended. The tears come without warning, hot and unstoppable. They pour down her cheeks, drip onto the table, onto her tray. She cannot stop them. She does not try. She holds the bottle to her nose and breathes in that scent. And suddenly she is 8 years old again, standing in her grandmother's kitchen, watching wrinkled hands measure out flour and sugar, listening to stories about the old days before the First War, when life was simple and good. She is 15, helping to bake Christmas cookies, the house filled with the smell of vanilla and cinnamon and ginger. She is 20, newly married, trying to recreate her grandmother's recipes in her own tiny kitchen, laughing when the cake falls flat but eating it anyway because it still tastes like love. All those memories, locked away for so long, come flooding back in a single overwhelming wave. And with them comes the realization of what she has lost, not just the war. Not just her country, her home, her husband who died at Stalingrad, but the small things, the everyday joys, the taste of vanilla, the smell of cinnamon, the simple pleasure of food that is more than fuel, that is comfort and memory and connection to the people she loved. Her regime told her those things were frivolous, wasteful, unnecessary in a time of war. They told her to be strong, to sacrifice, to accept deprivation as a virtue, and she believed them. She believed that wanting flavor, wanting pleasure, wanting anything beyond bare survival was selfish and weak. But here, in this American camp, An enemy guard has placed a bottle of vanilla extract on her table as if it is the most natural thing in the world. As if even prisoners, even enemies, deserve food that tastes good. As if the small joys of life are not frivolous but essential, not luxuries but basic human dignity. The guard is staring at her now, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. He says something in English, his tone gentle, questioning. Marguerite cannot answer. She can only cry, clutching the bottle like a lifeline, breathing in that sweet, familiar scent. Another guard approaches, an older man with kind eyes. He speaks to the first guard in rapid English, then disappears into the kitchen. When he returns, he carries two more small containers, one filled with cinnamon, the other with sugar. He sets them on the table next to the vanilla, then says something slowly, carefully, as if trying to make her understand. The younger guard tries to translate, his German halting but earnest. He says, "You can ask for these any time. We have more." Marguerite looks up at him, at his freckled face and his honest eyes, and she understands that he does not comprehend why she is crying. He thinks perhaps she is overwhelmed by kindness, or maybe homesick, or simply exhausted. He does not understand that she is mourning. Mourning the years she spent believing that flavor was frivolous, that pleasure was weakness, that she deserved nothing more than gray bread and bitter coffee. Mourning the regime that taught her to despise the very things that make life worth living. The other women at her table are watching now, their own meals forgotten. Some look confused, some look envious. But a few, the older ones, the ones who remember the before times, look at the vanilla extract and the cinnamon and the sugar, and their eyes fill with tears too. They understand. They remember. That night in her assigned barracks, Marguerite lies on a real mattress with real sheets and a real pillow, and she cannot sleep. Her stomach is full for the first time in years, uncomfortably full, and her mind is racing. She thinks about the vanilla, about the guard's casual assumption that prisoners should have access to seasonings, to flavor, to small comforts. She thinks about the meals she ate in Berlin, in Hamburg, in the countryside where she was sent when the bombing grew too intense. Meals that were never quite enough, never quite satisfying, always tinged with the taste of deprivation and propaganda. She thinks about the posters that hung in every public building, every train station, every school. Sacrifice for the fatherland, strength through hardship, luxury is treason. She believed those slogans. She repeated them to herself when her stomach ached with hunger, when her clothes hung loose on her shrinking frame, when she watched neighbors collapse from malnutrition. She told herself it was necessary, that everyone was suffering equally, that the cause was worth the cost. But it was a lie. The leaders did not go hungry. The officers did not eat sawdust bread. And the cause, whatever it was supposed to be, was not worth the systematic destruction of joy, of flavor, of the small human pleasures that make life bearable. The Americans, the enemies, the people she was told were barbaric and cruel, have given her vanilla extract. They have given her a choice about how her food tastes. They have treated her, a prisoner, a defeated enemy, with more basic human dignity than her own government ever did. The thought is almost too large to hold. It threatens to crack open everything she thought she knew, everything she believed. So she focuses on the small things, on the weight of the blanket, soft and warm, on the sound of the other women breathing in the darkness, some snoring, some crying softly, some whispering to each other in German. On the memory of that vanilla scent, sweet and familiar and achingly beautiful. She will think about the bigger things later, about what it means that her captors treat her better than her own leaders did. about what she will do with this knowledge, this understanding, when the war is truly over and she has to build a new life from the ruins of the old one. But for now, she simply lies in the darkness and remembers the taste of vanilla, and she lets herself cry until there are no tears left. The next morning, Marguerite wakes to the sound of a bell ringing for roll call. She dresses in the clean clothes they gave her yesterday, simple and plain but without holes or stains, and she joins the line of women filing out of the barracks. The Virginia morning is cool and misty, the grass wet with dew. Birds sing in the trees that line the compound, their voices bright and cheerful. It is almost obscene, that cheerfulness, in a place of captivity. But it is also strangely comforting. At breakfast, she takes a bowl of oatmeal, plain and steaming. She sits at the same table as yesterday and she waits. The young guard appears again, carrying his tray of seasonings. When he reaches her table, he smiles, a small, tentative expression, and he sets down the vanilla extract without being asked. Then he adds the cinnamon and the sugar, and he says something in English that sounds like a question. Marguerite nods. She does not trust her voice yet. She unscrews the cap of the vanilla and she pours a small amount into her oatmeal, watching the brown liquid swirl through the pale grain. Then she adds cinnamon, just a sprinkle and a spoonful of sugar. She stirs it all together and she lifts the spoon to her mouth. The taste is everything she remembered and more. Sweet and warm and complex, with layers of flavor that unfold on her tongue. It is not her grandmother's kitchen. It is not Heidelberg before the war. But it is a connection to that time, a thread that links her past to her present, that reminds her she is still human, still capable of experiencing pleasure, still worthy of small joys. She eats slowly, savoring every bite, and she does not cry this time. She simply eats and she remembers, and she begins, very tentatively, to imagine a future where food tastes good again, where life is more than mere survival, where the small pleasures are not frivolous but essential. Around her, other women begin to notice. They watch as she adds vanilla to her oatmeal, as she sprinkles cinnamon and sugar. Some look skeptical, some look hungry, but a few, emboldened by her example, raise their hands when the guard passes, and they point to the seasonings and they ask, in broken English or through gestures, if they too can have some. The guard nods. He smiles. He distributes the bottles freely, generously, as if there is an endless supply, as if flavor is not a luxury but a right. And maybe, Marguerite thinks, stirring her oatmeal and breathing in the scent of vanilla and cinnamon, maybe it is. Maybe that is the difference between a society that values human dignity and one that does not. Maybe that is what she has been fighting for all along, without knowing it. Not territory or ideology or national pride, but the simple right to live a life that includes flavor, pleasure, joy. The right to be treated as a human being, not a cog in a machine, not a sacrifice on an altar, but a person who deserves vanilla in her oatmeal. It is a small thing, almost laughably small in the context of war and death and destruction. But it is also everything. It is the difference between surviving and living. And for the first time in 4 years, Marguerite Fisher begins to believe that she might someday be able to live again. The weeks that follow are strange and disorienting. Marguerite is assigned to work in the camp's administrative office, using her cartography skills to help organize maps and documents. The work is easy, almost absurdly so compared to the frantic pace of wartime Berlin. The American officers are polite, even friendly. They ask her about her training, her experience, her opinions on various technical matters. They treat her like a professional, not a prisoner. At meals, she continues to add vanilla to her oatmeal, cinnamon to her coffee, sugar to her tea. The other women begin to do the same, and the mess hall fills with the scents of spices and sweetness, transforming from a place of mere sustenance into something that almost resembles a dining hall. Some women request other seasonings: nutmeg, ginger, even cocoa powder. The guards comply without hesitation, bringing out small containers from the kitchen stores, explaining in broken German or through translators that these things are available, that the prisoners need only ask. It is a revelation, this casual abundance. Marguerite learns that the American soldiers eat the same food as the prisoners, prepared in the same kitchens, served on the same trays. There is no separate, better ration for the captors. No hidden luxury for the guards. Everyone eats the same chicken, the same potatoes, the same bread. The only difference is that the Americans have always had access to seasonings, have always assumed that food should taste good, have never been taught that flavor is a frivolous waste. She thinks about this often, lying in her bunk at night or walking the perimeter of the compound during the exercise hour. She thinks about the propaganda she absorbed, the lessons she learned, the beliefs she held. She thinks about how thoroughly her regime stripped away not just material comforts, but the very idea that comfort was acceptable, that pleasure was permissible, that human beings deserved more than bare survival. And she thinks about the guard who placed that bottle of vanilla on her table, who looked confused when she cried, who could not understand why such a small gesture would provoke such a profound reaction. He could not understand because he had never lived in a world where flavor was forbidden, where joy was suspect, where the simple act of making food taste good was considered wasteful and wrong. He could not understand because he had always lived in a society that believed, however imperfectly, that human dignity included the right to small pleasures, to everyday comforts, to vanilla in your oatmeal if you wanted it. It is not that America is perfect. Marguerite is not naive. She hears the whispers among the other prisoners, the stories of segregation and inequality, the tensions between different groups. She sees the way some guards are kinder than others, the way some prisoners receive better treatment based on their background or their willingness to cooperate. But even with all its flaws, this system treats her better than her own government ever did. It feeds her real food. It gives her seasonings. It allows her to sleep on a real mattress and wear clean clothes and work at a job that uses her skills. It treats her, a defeated enemy, with basic human dignity. And that, more than anything else, forces her to confront the lies she was told, the beliefs she held, the regime she served. One evening in early October, as the Virginia leaves begin to turn gold and red, Marguerite sits at her usual table in the mess hall, a bowl of oatmeal in front of her, a bottle of vanilla in her hand. She has done this dozens of times now, but the ritual still feels significant, still carries weight. She unscrews the cap, pours a small amount into the oatmeal, adds cinnamon and sugar and stirs. The scent rises, sweet and familiar, and she closes her eyes and breathes it in. She thinks about her grandmother, long dead now, buried in a cemetery that may or may not still exist after the bombing. She thinks about her husband, his body somewhere in the frozen wasteland of Russia. She thinks about her home in Heidelberg, destroyed in an air raid 3 years ago. She thinks about everything she has lost, everything that can never be recovered. But she also thinks about this, the simple act of adding flavor to her food, of choosing how her meal tastes, of experiencing pleasure in the midst of captivity. It is a small thing, almost nothing in the grand scheme of history and war and human suffering. But it is also a beginning, a first step toward reclaiming her humanity, toward rebuilding a life that includes joy as well as sorrow, pleasure as well as pain, flavor as well as sustenance. She opens her eyes and lifts the spoon to her mouth. The oatmeal tastes like vanilla and cinnamon and sugar. It tastes like memory and hope, and the possibility of a future she cannot yet imagine but is beginning, very slowly, to believe in. And for now, in this moment, in this American camp in Virginia, that is enough.